I woke up to a dry faucet and a panic phone call from my neighbor, screaming that nothing's coming out of the taps. As I raced outside, what I saw made my knees buckle. My massive water tank was filled with hardened concrete. The HOA had done it, thinking they were punishing me. What they didn't realize, that tank didn't just serve me. It was the only water supply for the entire neighborhood. And now, their petty revenge had just triggered a citywide disaster, and I held the receipts. When I bought this land on the edge of town, people thought I was crazy. It was a forgotten patch near the hills, dry, cracked, and ignored by the city. But I saw potential. Beneath the surface, a dormant water spring ran quietly, and with a little investment and a lot of hard work, I turned that patch of dust into a lifeline. I installed a 10,000-gallon underground water tank with advanced filtration, powered by solar panels. It wasn't just about being off-grid. It was about freedom, about never relying on a broken, overtaxed city infrastructure again. What started as a personal project soon turned into something much bigger. When the drought hit and the city placed strict water restrictions on every home, my neighbors came knocking. First one, then three, then a whole line of families, desperate and scared. Their taps had run dry. Their kids were going to bed without baths. Toilets wouldn't flush. The city offered no help, but I had enough. Quietly, without fanfare, I rerouted lines from my tank to serve the immediate homes around me. It was discreet but effective. Over time, nearly the entire western sector of the neighborhood became dependent on my supply. I never charged a dime. I never asked for recognition. I just wanted people to live with dignity. But that didn't sit well with the HOA, especially not with Karen Whitmore, the president. From day one, she had her eyes on my property, hated that I had bypassed their overpriced water delivery schemes, and refused to pay their neighborhood maintenance fees. She saw my independence as rebellion, my generosity as threat. I kept quiet, thinking my permits and good intentions would be enough. I had every document in order, from county water authority approvals to environmental clearance. My setup was 100% legal. Still, the HOA sent letters, warnings, then threats. They called my tank unauthorized and claimed it was an eyesore, despite the fact that it was underground and landscaped beautifully. I responded politely, offering tours, even public records. But I could see it in their eyes. They didn't care about permits or facts. They cared about control. And when they realized they couldn't control me, they decided to destroy me instead. But what they didn't know was how much they depended on me. The first time I realized the HOA was escalating, it was subtle. A neon orange violation notice stuck crookedly to my front gate. It accused me of unauthorized water storage and gave me a 14-day deadline to dismantle and remove my underground tank. I laughed at the absurdity. My permits were city-approved, signed by the county, backed by engineers. I scanned the letter, ready to toss it in the trash, but something in the tone, in the smug wording, felt off. Like a warning before a storm. Over the next few days, more letters arrived. Then emails. Then actual visits. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, stood on my porch one morning in her pressed beige suit, flanked by two board members, like some kind of mob boss delegation. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. "Mr. Hale," she began, voice clipped, "your tank is in direct violation of our neighborhood covenants. We have the authority to enforce removal." I calmly pulled out copies of my documents, handed them to her with a practiced patience. "Everything here is legal," I said, tapping the signatures with my finger. "I've done nothing wrong." She didn't even look at them. "You may think you're special," she hissed, "but nobody is above the HOA." Then she turned and walked away without another word. I stood there, the paper still in my hand, my heart pounding harder than it should have. A week later, it happened. I left home early to help a neighbor with a ruptured pipe across town. I was gone for 3 hours. When I came back, my driveway was a mess of tire tracks. A cement truck sat idling at the corner. And my yard, my beautiful yard that I'd landscaped for years, torn apart. My water tank's access point shattered. Concrete poured inside like some kind of burial. Wet gray slush still oozed from the edges. I ran toward it, screaming, stumbling, slipping in the mud. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a calculated, cold-blooded hit. The HOA had hired a contractor while I was away and ordered the entire tank, filled with concrete. I dropped to my knees as reality sank in. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally taught me a lesson, punished the rebel who refused to bend. But what they didn't know was that by destroying my water tank, they hadn't just hurt me. They had just doomed the entire neighborhood. The very next morning, the calls started. First, it was Mrs. Thompson from 2 doors down, a sweet, elderly woman who relied on the water from my system to bathe, cook, and take her medications. She sounded frantic. "There's no water, Mr. Hale. Nothing comes out. Did something happen?" Before I could answer, another call came in. Then another. Within the hour, my phone was lighting up like a fire alarm. Mothers were crying that their kids couldn't shower for school. Seniors were panicking over dry faucets and unflushable toilets. I knew, with a sick twist in my gut, that this wasn't some glitch. The tank they had destroyed yesterday wasn't just my water. It was their water too. By noon, a full-blown crisis had erupted. Households across the entire west sector of the neighborhood had gone dry. The city lines had been shut off months ago due to aging infrastructure, and my private tank had been the silent, unseen backbone of our water supply ever since. The rerouting was legal, fully documented, but I kept it quiet to avoid HOA interference. That secrecy had now become our curse. The HOA had filled that tank with concrete, thinking they were punishing one man. But in their arrogance, they had condemned over 70 families to a dry, sweltering hell. I stood in the middle of our neighborhood park that evening as a hastily gathered emergency meeting took place. People were shouting. Some were crying. Others looked at me like I was the only one who could make sense of this chaos. So I did. I pulled out the file I kept in my truck, all the rerouting blueprints, the permits, the emails. I held them up like evidence in a courtroom and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "The water you all used? It came from my tank. The one the HOA just destroyed yesterday." A silence fell over the crowd, broken only by gasps and murmurs. Karen Whitmore wasn't there, conveniently on vacation. But the rest of the board? Pale, shaking, suddenly realizing what they had done. One man yelled, "They've doomed us." A woman clutched her child, eyes wide with disbelief. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a case of HOA harassment anymore. This was sabotage on a community scale. And I wasn't going to stay silent another second. The media picked up the story within 48 hours. A neighborhood without water during one of the hottest weeks of the year. All because a petty HOA sought revenge? It was the kind of scandal that spread like wildfire. News vans lined the street, reporters knocking on doors, cameras pointed at the dried-up lawns and dusty porches. But I didn't hide. I stood in front of them all, held up my folder of permits, maps, and city approvals, and told the truth. The HOA acted without cause. They destroyed a legal, essential water system that was serving this community during a crisis. And they never asked, never checked. They just acted recklessly. The headline that night was brutal. HOA sabotages neighborhood water supply, retaliation or incompetence. The mayor's office got involved. Then the county health department. Within days, emergency tankers were brought in to supply temporary water, but the damage had already been done. Seniors had been hospitalized for dehydration. Children were sent to relatives out of town. People's lives were turned upside down, and everyone wanted answers. Karen Whitmore finally returned from her vacation, only to find protesters outside her home and legal notices on her door. At first, she tried to play it down. "We believed the tank was unauthorized," she told reporters. "We were acting in the best interest of the neighborhood." But the evidence didn't lie. I had dated emails showing the HOA had been warned, video footage of the cement truck entering my property, copies of the cease and desist letter I'd sent just days before the sabotage. They had no defense left. Under mounting pressure, the city launched a formal investigation. Karen, along with 2 other board members, was suspended immediately pending charges. They were sued not just by me, but by dozens of families who had suffered because of their actions. Civil court, criminal court, both came calling. And while they faced their reckoning, I stayed focused. I met with city officials. outlined a plan to rebuild the tank, and this time, made sure it was part of the official emergency infrastructure. The neighborhood no longer had to rely on secret lines and quiet help. It would be protected, legally and publicly. The HOA thought they could break me. They thought they could erase me with a truck full of cement. But in trying to silence me, they gave me a platform. And now, their fall was the lesson everyone would remember. The day we broke ground to rebuild the tank was nothing short of symbolic. Neighbors came out with folding chairs. Kids held homemade signs that read, "Thank you, Mr. Hale." And even city officials attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. But this time, it wasn't just about digging a hole and pouring concrete. It was about restoring trust, dignity, and security. The new water system was bigger, stronger, and officially integrated into the city's emergency infrastructure. No more quiet rerouting. No more secrecy. We installed filtration systems, backup generators, and even a community access valve. I named it the Whitmore Well, not out of spite, but as a permanent reminder of what happens when people let power go to their heads. Karen's name, once synonymous with control, would now serve as a warning carved in stainless steel. Court order, replaced with a community council voted in by the very residents it would serve. People who lived here. People who cared. Karen Whitmore was banned from holding any leadership position in a registered community organization for 10 years. She vanished from public view soon after the lawsuits drained her finances and the court demanded restitution payments to every household affected. Her fall was brutal, but necessary. And while some felt sorry for her, most saw it for what it was, justice. I didn't rebuild the tank alone. Families donated supplies. Local businesses offered discounts. Teenagers volunteered their weekends to paint murals across the new housing for the tank. Scenes of unity, resilience, and hope. And slowly, what had been a symbol of control and division transformed into the heart of our neighborhood. We held barbecues next to it. Town meetings beneath its canopy. It became more than infrastructure. It became a monument. As for me, I didn't just go back to my life. I founded a group called Neighborhood Watchdogs, a volunteer organization that helps residents across the state fight back against corrupt and abusive HOA boards. We expose overreach, educate homeowners on their rights, and offer legal support when no one else will listen. Because if this experience taught me anything, it's that silence is dangerous. But action, even from one person, can ripple across an entire community. The HOA filled my tank with concrete, hoping to shut me down. Instead, they built the foundation of something far more powerful than they could ever control. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share to spread awareness. Subscribe to Faces of Racism for more real stories that expose injustice and empower communities.